there's something special when you're just sat there in the calm and that quiet before the race starts, isn't it? In anticipation.
Attention. Go.
Yeah, and that moment of stillness, and then an explosion from nothing to everything, and everything they've been waiting to do. Off the start, the Wyfold's tricky steering, and you can see here Thames messing with the boys. That's caused them a little bit of a shipwreck.
The actual tricky bit of the course is coming at 150 metres. The wind is swirling around just off the top of the island, and Cox's Falls are notoriously tricky in the Wyfolds to steer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've seen some challenges there, but they seem to have recovered from that little bit of messing with the buoy. And then, as you say, Jim, at the end of the island, you've got to contend with a crosswind, but you also have to contend with, because these guys are racing into the stream, so the water coming down the river, there's a fair bit this year as well, and that can push you, as it deflects off the island, that can push you into the centre of the course. But Thames seem to have recovered well, and we're riding alongside them. Thames on the near side have maybe gained 1 or 2 seats on the UK Armed Forces on the far side.
I read from the programme, like, it's interesting contrast. So the bow row and the Thames crew is steering, there's a stroke in the UK Armed Forces is rowing. Now, I wonder in this course, which is the advantage?
Yeah, I always used to prefer to steer from stroke on a straight course, because you can just look back and see the buoys or the booms behind you and know that you're straight. But it is more tricky off the start when you haven't got that parallax behind you to look for. In the bow seat, you've got the advantage of seeing the boat behind you and how it's moving. But actually the rowers being in the way can make it a bit more distracting. And then the other thing, of course, is if you're steering, there's a load of pressure on you. So if you're stroking, there's pressure because you're trying to set the length and the rhythm and thinking about the race plan, and then you're thinking about steering. So it's a question of preference and experience, I think.
I think bow's a bit more effect on the steering with the actual rowing ability as well. So you've got kind of that much pressure put into the water as well as the rudder.
That's right. You've got the, here we go, look Jim, we can see behind a beautiful shot of the steering post. So you can see those 2 fluorescent posts with a little V shape in front of them. If you're sitting at stroke or anywhere in the crew, you can look behind you and have the line going straight to the bottom of the V, and then you know you're straight. So off the start, that's what you're looking at as a steersman, to make sure that you're keeping the line in the centre of the V. And then once you're a few hundred metres down the track, as the crews are now, you've got the chance to use the course either side of you, the 24-metre wide course. So it's quite a wide track, doesn't feel like it sometimes if you're steering.
Especially if the dreaded booms are just off the end of your blade. When I mentioned the booms, they're the wooden edges to the course, particularly in the Cox's boat. One wants to keep a good distance from them.
Yeah, and this is looking like a pretty close race so far, with Thames B nearest to the camera and the UK Armed Forces to the right of the picture, going hell for leather into the middle of the course, where you want to be starting to get into a more sustainable stroke rate, perhaps 1 or 2 strokes a minute lower than the start phase, and make sure you've got an efficient length. You cannot be burning all your energy at the rate you do in the first 300 or 400 metres.
And the UK Armed Forces crew, they've linked up with Upper Thames, which is one of the clubs on the course. So they'll have a good knowledge of the course, and they'll have been practicing on here, and they'll know when's a good time to put a move in to try and squeeze ahead of Thames.
Yeah, they've got a Wyfold winner in the crew as well, so there's some experience of the event that is going to be great for the other crew members to draw upon.
Just seen there the umpire warning the Thames crew, just moving them over to their correct station.
Yeah, this middle bit of the course does seem to be proving challenging for quite a few of the Coxless boats in particular. As I say, quite a lot of water coming down. There's also some openness on the left-hand bank as we look here at the UK Armed Forces crew. In the 2 seats, the taller guy, Steve Jones, is the only newbie to Henley Royal Regatta. The others have raced here before.
They seem to be settling in a nice long rhythm there. They look very relaxed when you look at that crew.
Yeah, it's a pretty good style, and maybe that efficiency is going to count for something. Thames looking like they may be pushing a bit harder, but I do like the style, as you say, that experience and the flow that they're achieving. Just what you want to feel in a Coxless boat.
If you look at if you compare, with the look on the faces of the 2 crews, we're just coming through halfway now. We're going to the 40 marker. And you can see when we looked at the UK Armed Forces crew, they seem that much more relaxed. But again, the crews are coming together. It looks like they're both coming to the middle of the course and being warned to move apart by the umpire.
Well, this is turning into an absolutely cracking race, isn't it? With Thames stroked by Max Deering. He is at Dartmouth University in the US, a 2017 winner of the Head of the Charles, so no stranger to racing successfully. Crews really close together here. You can hear as they go through Upper Thames, enormous screams from the crowd. A very, very close race. Thames have the slight edge, but as we say, it looks like the Armed Forces have got a little bit more of an efficient style.
there's going to be a huge cheer for both crews as they come past. So the UK Armed Forces cheered by Upper Thames. They've got their friends there, no doubt. And then you're into the Remnant Club, and obviously Thames being one of the 7 Remnant clubs, so that was a big cheer too.
Absolutely, and it looks like Thames continue to be a little nose in front as we look down from above. The beautiful parallel booms of the course that we talked about earlier, giving the crews a guide to steer straight, and huge support, as you say, for the Thames crew, but also the Armed Forces. It was great to see the King's Cup at Henley, Armed Forces from across the world competing here. Great to see the Armed Forces competing, and they are not giving any easy victory to Thames. It looks to me like the Armed Forces have gained maybe a foot or two in the last 30 seconds.
I think it's changing stroke for stroke. And this is a really interesting part of the course. It's quite quiet. It's 20-25 strokes. There aren't many supporters on the bank before they come into the enclosures. And races are often lost or won here, but by the looks of it at the moment, absolutely neck or neck, the lead changing with every single stroke.
Yeah, we've got the tandem rig in both crews on opposite sides, so you can see the 2 oars close together on the Thames crew at the top of our picture, and the 2 oars close together in the Armed Forces crew on the bottom of our picture. So the umpire will be concerned, keeping a close eye on any encroachment across that middle line. And Jim, you'll tell us a bit what the rule is in terms of how you should steer here. Where do you start to be seen as encroaching by an umpire?
I think it's when you impact on the other crew, so it's all about fairness. You see Thames are just wobbling around a little bit, which will be costing them, because ideally you don't want to put any steering in. So they've moved towards the booms, moved away, although it doesn't seem to slow them down. I think they've taken a few feet lead coming into the enclosures.
It really is nick and tuck. This is an excellent first round race here in the Wyfold Challenge Cup for coxless 4s. Thames and the UK Armed Forces battling it out. Looks like the lead's gone back to Thames now from our drone shot here. Armed Forces will need to respond because we are starting to run out of track. We're in the last 450 metres or so.
And this is the tricky bit. You mentioned earlier when talking to Greg, this water's very bobbly. From overhead it looks quite smooth and almost idyllic, but actually it's quite challenging up at this end. There's a few washes coming through the booms. It's not as easy as it looks, and the Thames is slowly drawing away in the last maybe 15 to 20 strokes to the finish.
Well, Thames have the edge here. The legs will be burning in both crews. Quite an intense race. Thames have the edge. Max steering and the stroke seat, driving his men through in this campaign. 30 Henley appearances between the 2 crews. A ton of experience. Armed Forces have really got to go for it, but the last 5 or 6 strokes, it looks like Thames have broken them apart, and they have the lead as they come to the finish line. So it's Thames Rowing Club beating the UK Armed Forces by 3/4 of a length. First round of the Wyfold Challenge Cup.